Welcome to Beyond Death, where we examine near-death experiences from people who say they died, visited the other side, and came back. Today's NDE comes to us from Dawn, who describes how Jesus surrounded him with loving protection during a terrifying moment in his youth. Let's get into it. Dawn writes, "Thank you for your YouTube channel and others like it, as they brought me back to Christ and gave me a strong belief in the afterlife. Once you hear my story, you will understand why I have never told anyone the whole story or even an abbreviated version, as many would condemn me even now. I have been especially wary of the condemnation of those that feel they are piously religious and have the one truth. This has kept me from church. The NDE stories have told me that not only was my experience real, but also that the good Lord loves all, even me. It is time to tell my story. When I was young, I had a few experiences which should have convinced me that there is more to the physical world than our five senses detect. One experience was of telepathy between myself and Amanda, a young woman my age, around 20 years old at the time. I heard her voice in my head as she asked me a complex question, and I proceeded to give her the answer, not realizing that she hadn't said anything out loud. There was no way I could have known the question, and her jaw dropped when I answered it. She said that she had been thinking about how to ask the question prior to me answering it. This was witnessed by several other university friends at our gathering table, and jokes were made about it for several weeks afterwards. Perhaps I should have asked out Amanda, as she might have been my soulmate, but I didn't. I now think this was real rather than an unexplainable fluke. 38 years later, being a scientist, having raised a family of 4, and many experiences in life as a human, made me slowly discount these experiences. The magic I had felt in youth had become simple physical life. I had slowly gone from a believer in more than physicality to believing physical death of the body was the end. Lights out. This brought me incredible sadness, especially for lives past, as all that they had gathered in love and experiences just went poof. My dad, who was the most decent person to have ever lived, in my assessment, just went poof. That is very sad indeed. I could hardly bear to look at pictures of deceased loved ones, or even historical sites which had brought great interest before, now made me sad. This sadness hit a new low when I returned home with my mom's beautiful colored-cut crystal glasses. Since my earliest memories, I knew that these glasses would someday be mine, and that was somehow important. I think I now know why, because they would mark an inflection point in my perspective. At the lowest of lows, I grieved while drinking beer from these beautiful glasses while I smoked pot concentrate. This would temporarily blunt the sadness until the next day. Wash and repeat. I knew I shouldn't be using these drugs, but why not? What difference did it make if I shortened my life by 10 years? I was divorced after 25 years of marriage, retired early, and my kids were adults off on their own journeys. Raising my kids with love and furthering my career was my purpose. Suddenly, I had no purpose in life, had no purpose, only sadness of lives lost. Emotionally, I was back to the same place I was when I had my near NDE, which I will describe. I no longer cared without purpose. I was watching YouTube videos when an NDE channel showed up on my home screen. I don't know why it was on my home screen, but I clicked on it thinking I'd get a good chuckle. What I got instead was an immediate awakening that brought back a terrifying experience I had when I was 16 years old in 1980. I had safely kept this experience tucked away, and I know it happened, but don't want to think about it because I am ashamed, and people will condemn me if they hear it fuller. The NDE on YouTube talked of a feeling of total love, acceptance, and safety. In my near NDE, I had also had intense love, acceptance, timelessness, and safety. That love only came when I prayed to Christ with an intensity unfelt ever again. It was Jesus who saved me from what I now think was a for sure death at the hands of a dangerous man. This is a near NDE that would have resulted in a DE, I have little doubt. I was such a loser at age 16 that I failed to pass driver education, and frankly I didn't care. I wasn't evil or even bad, only I had zero feeling of self-worth, which meant I was a setup for the devil's fun. I was a small, non-attractive, non-athletic, introverted male whose single talent should have been intellectual, but I had failed in education because of a long story for another time. Because former friends had cars and didn't want to have much to do with me, I found myself in very poor company indeed. I found myself with two other outcasts my age and a guy a few years older. The older guy had a pretty and very pregnant girlfriend who he claimed was going to give birth to Satan's child. The guy was really into the devil, but I thought it was just a boost meant to impress. I was very wrong. One night, all four of us loaded into the outcast car we nicknamed Alabama and cruised around town looking for excitement. We pulled into a parking lot that was known as a meeting place for those looking to party and started looking for a drug deal to power us through the night. The satanic man tried to hand me $5 for drugs, which was snatched by another man who quickly drove off saying thanks as he fled laughing. The satanic man looked at me and chuckled like in agreement. Oh well, $5 lost. And I thought nothing more of it. About 2 hours later, and without any drug action, we were driving in the countryside when the satanic guy asked me for his $5 back. Without any caution, I reminded him that a man had snatched his money and I would give him his money back the next day, as I was penniless at the time. The satanic man was sitting in the back seat with me and suddenly lunged for me, grabbing my hair and putting a knife to my throat. I was in a desperate position and at the total mercy of a madman. At this point, the man started his devil talk again, eventually demanding that I denounce Jesus Christ or he would slit my throat. There was little reason for me to doubt him, and my so-called two friends in the front seats were silent. At this point, I prayed with all the power in my soul directly to Jesus and said, "Dear Jesus, I will say what this man wants, but I will mean none of it. I will never denounce you in my soul. You are love, and I will never renounce love." At this point, time seemed to slow to a standstill, and the most intense feeling of love and safety came over me. The love and feeling of safety were indescribable, much like people try to express they felt in NDEs. I felt the love deep down, like it permeated my entire body, and the feeling of safety was absolute. I knew this man would not hurt me now, and the human words without any meaning came out of my mouth. Sometimes I think that the words I intended to say were not even the words I said. Only what I said caused the man to suddenly relax. After what seemed like 15 to 20 seconds or eternity, as time seemed temporarily suspended, the man demanded the driver stop and shoved me out the door. I never saw Satan Man, Alabama, or the other guy who I have a memory block of his identity again in person. The Satan Man made the small-town paper a year later as he tortured a man to death with lit cigarettes. I read the first part of the newspaper article, and when I knew who the murderer was, I never looked at it again. One would think this experience would drive me towards Christ, and in some ways it did, because I cleaned up my life and became respectable by learning to read, getting a doctorate in physics, and having a family. I learned to like and then love myself and others. I loved that family dearly and still do, even my abusive ex-wife. But the shame of what I might have said kept a wedge between me and the church even to this day. I am not afraid to go before Christ, as we both know I asked for forgiveness, even before saying those dreadful words, if I even said those words, but it is the living that I believe will not forgive me. You could say, well, don't tell anyone at church and all will be fine. And you are correct, as it is love that is important, and I can tell everyone about it once the veil of our earthly existence is removed in the afterlife. It is remarkable the effect of truly believing in the afterlife, as roughly described by the conglomerate of NDEs, has had upon me. The reduced fear, reduced desire to judge others, dramatically increased forgiveness, and most of all the loss of the great end-of-life sadness have already had a remarkable effect upon me in 3 short months. All of a sudden, the pictures of deceased loved ones give me happiness rather than sadness, and I can finally truly forgive people where the anger had been building before. My aunt, who caused me some emotional pain, is easily forgiven now where before it seemed impossible. I am still trying to put why this is the case into words, but now forgiveness is easy. I think it might be because there is nothing for me to forgive, as forgiveness of her sins are for her alone. She had to forgive herself once she understood how her actions caused me emotional pain in her life review. My aunt was a remarkable person who had her own fears, which I brought out. I now think this long period of building anger and sadness was part of what I agreed to in my life contract. I needed to feel this great sadness for some reason. Those beautiful cut crystal glasses are proof that magic doesn't just happen when you are young. God bless all and bring all into the light. Notes from Beyond Death. As I was reading the email Dawn sent in containing this near-death experience, I could already anticipate the comments. Somewhere there is a person that is about to say, "But he didn't die, so this is not an NDE." To that person, whoever you are, I want you to define the word near before you make that comment. You really do only have to be 2% smarter than you let people believe you are. Big thanks to Dawn for sending this in. Until next time, stay blessed.